I've got a gorgeous flat slab Angelite stone, this gorgeous blue. It's from Charmer's Gems, and I've got to set it somehow and suspend it as a pendant. So I'm going to show you how I do that. So I draw around the outline of the flat stone. So this could be a piece of glass, it could be broken pottery, it could be sea glass, anything like that. And then I draw on the inner outline of the stone because I want it to be a little bit smaller because it's going to sit on the back. And then I decide where my prongs and my suspension link is going to go. So I look at the stone and put some prongs in to hold it. And then I measure with a piece of string the outline of the circumference of the stone, and then I've got to add also the prong lengths, which are going to be doubled wire. So I measure the length of the circumference, then add doubled up wire. So I've got to add all that together, and then that gives me enough wire to cut from my spool. And now I'm placing my wire on my drawing, so that gives me the outline, and I use that as the template. So this is the prongs. I double up the wire and then I bend back to the outline and then follow the contour again until I get to the next prong. Then I bend that around to create the next prong, squeeze that together to make it parallel, and then bend it back at right angles to go further round the frame. And I have to follow my template so that, I wanted to show you this because any shape will do for a flat stone like this. So you go around the whole circumference, but you use your drawing template to do this. And you keep bending, you use your fingers, you use your pliers, you use anything you can. And actually, the more wiggly the stone is, sometimes the easier it is to prong set because you've got little nicks and niches that you can put the prongs into, which means they hold really, really well. So I'm doing this obviously very fast, so not as sort of fastidiously as I would if I was, making this for a commission. I'm actually just wanted to show you the technique that I use and thought it might be useful for some of your projects. So I'm coming now to the end, so I've got my last prong coming up now. So doubled up wire. And this is 0.8 of a millimetre, the wire I'm using. It's 20 gauge, so it's not heavy. You can see it's very easy. It's silver plated copper. And now I've come to the top. So I've got the two ends now meeting at the top. In fact, they're overlapping a bit. I just checked my drawing. They're overlapping, so I'm going to have to just bend that up and foreshorten it at the top so that they meet better. So there we have the outline done. Next thing is to get some 0.4 millimetre silver plated binding wire, and I'm going to bind the two ends together at the top. So you don't have to go mad with the binding, it's just a little bit around the two, and then I'm going to bring it round to the next. See, I've bound the base of the first prong because it was so near the top, and I'm going to use the other end of the wire to go to the second prong and just bind that base together so it doesn't open up. And now I'm going to do each of the prongs individually. I mean, I could go around with a piece, but I don't need to. So I'm just binding the bases of each of those prongs because otherwise they could open up when I come to push them around the flat stone. They can open up because we can't solder anything. So this is a way of keeping the whole framework or structure framework at the base together in one piece. Sometimes I also wire in a shape at the back so that it can't fall through. But to be honest, this piece of Angelite is so flat, it'll be fine. So now I've done all the bindings on all the bases of the prongs, and I'm going to use my hammer just to hammer the wire in between, just that will work harden it. And then I'm going to hammer each of the ends of the prongs. That will flatten them, so when I push them around the top of the stone, they sit better on the, you know, the top area of the stone rather than get lifted. The next thing is to bend the prongs up. So you can see I'm doing this while keeping it on my steel block because I want a nice firm surface to hold everything down. So you just hold the thing, and then with your flat nose pliers just bring each of the prongs up at a right angle, apart from the suspension links at the top, the wires going up at the top. So now we're ready to offer the stone into the setting. It needs a little bit of manipulation, but it's only because I rush these things sometimes. I'm so keen to make them that I do rush. So now I'm going to bend the prongs over so that I can set it and get them into this setting. So just go on opposite sides, and you can use your fingers and just use, I'm just using my round nose pliers just to round those edges off, and also so I don't scrape the stone. And if you have nylon pliers, they'll work very well because they won't scratch the stone at all. And now I'm using the nylon head of my hammer, so you push it from the sides and over like a, you know, a prong setting tool really. Just the nylon head is perfect for this on your hammer. You're not hammering, you're pushing and just using a bit of, you know, muscle, but you're not hammering the piece. And now have a look to see at the back. If it's moved out, you want some of the wire to sit behind. So I'm just lifting that up, and really I shouldn't be using my pliers, steel pliers. I should use nylon pliers, but I haven't got any at the moment. Maybe I just use my fingers. So push the wires so that they come just behind the stone, and that will help sort of keep the stone in place. And if you just do little movements all the time, you'll find that eventually the wire just eases up and goes where you want it to go. So it's little by little all the time, because you don't want to just, you know, sort of scratch the stone, and you just want to do it gently. So now it's fixed within my setting, and make sure that everything's flat, everything's secure. So I've got one short piece and one long piece, and so this short one I'm going to use to also hold the stone in place at the front. So I'm going to just make a little bit of a swirl. It's like a decorative detail. So I'm just going to sort of start, it's like starting a spiral. And I'm going to hammer that also so it sits flat on my stone. So obviously lift it up, don't put it on the stone. And then just put it on the edge of your steel block, give that a bit of a hammering so it flattens out at the end, and then you can push that over and that will sit nicely. I'm just going to put a little kink in the wire there so it just sits more centrally and it flattens against the top of the stone there. So that's just a little added detail really. Now I've got rather a lot of wire at the top. I didn't sort of calculate my wire too well. I usually go for too much just in case. So I think what I'll do, I'll try and use it all. And I'm going to do something that I've never done before, I think. Normally I would just make a wrap loop at the top, put a bead first and then make a wrap loop. But let's go for something completely different. So I'm going to add a couple of beads. And the only reason I add a couple is because one of the beads, my first bead, has got a rather big drill hole, so I need something to sort of stabilize it. And now we need to make the bail. And because I've got so much wire and I don't want to waste it, I'm going to double it up. So I'm going to take about 1.5 inches remaining there, extending out. Double the wire over and just get it to run parallel. So I'm just squeezing the wires together so that they run parallel, and then bring them to the top of that bead and wrap it around there, and then in between to the next bead. That's just going to hold that doubled wire in place. So again, just underneath and between the next bead, and then just at the top of the stone. I'm just going to get rid of my wire there. Now, if like me you have any left over, don't throw it away, use it. Just do another little spiral which you can flatten at the back of the stone, and that also adds as another anchor to hold the prong setting in place. So now I've made a bit of a mess here, but there's always something you can do with a mess. So I'm going to twist these wires because they haven't come out as parallel as I wanted them to be. So when in doubt, do something different, which is this. Hold it at the top and then grip the two doubled wires and pull and twist and pull and twist. And what that does, it not only creates a twisted stem, but it also work hardens the wires together and it makes them nice and firm. So this will be my twisted top bail. And so now I've got to make a bail out of this twisted wire. So I'm going to get my bail makers. I'm going to go for a big bail because I've got quite a lot of wire there, and just curl this around to make a big loop. I'll go for the big size loop because I can then put it on a big chunky cord. And to secure that in place, because I haven't done a wrap loop, I've just brought it together, I can actually bind it. So I'm going to get some 0.4 wire just to put a little stitch. So here's my 0.4. I'm going to cut a short length off. Now I've got a little gap at the end. You know, when I twisted it, there's a little space in there that I can feed the wire through. And if I can feed it through, I can join it to the rest of the stem. So just bind it around the stem. I'm going back through that loop again just to give it a double sort of bit of security. And it needs pulling through this time. And then you've ended up with the two ends. And what you can do with the two ends is, again, give them a twist. So bring those two ends together so that they cross over at the front of your stone. And then you could give them a twist. So twist them, and you can either twist them and make another little spiral, which you can be flattened at the top, and it can hide all the little workings. I always like hiding my workings with spirals. It's always a good decorative sort of move. So there we go, just spiral it all up and flatten it against the top, just under the top bead. And I'm just going to work harden it a little bit. I mean, it was work hardened by twisting, but hammering twisted wire has a nice effect. It sort of gives it, you see the twists much more. And that's it. You've got a nice solid bail now. So that was an unusual bail. I don't normally do that. And that sort of came just out of the blue, maybe because it was a blue stone. So you could suspend that off a lovely chunky macrame cord. Or, as it's a blue stone, I've got a blue cord. So I can show you now how I would do the cord ends. I'm using 1.6mm aluminium wire to make these. You can do them with the silver plated copper, but it's just so much easier because it's nice and chunky and the cord is so chunky. So I'm just curling and curling around my bail maker, and you can see that I checked that the cord sat within that coil. So I know it's going to slide into that coil, and then I cut it off the spool, leaving a little stem of about 1 inch. And I need 2 of these, obviously, for the 2 cord ends. So I'll make another one, Same thing again, just repeat and then cut it off, leaving a tail. So those are, I mean, you can buy cord ends for kumihimo, which you can glue on. So you'll find those online and in bead shops. But this is how you can make them from scratch with wire. And then I'm going to make a link with those extending wires at the end of my coils. And I'll curl it around. Any excess wire can be cut off. I don't want it to stick out. So those little coils sit 90 degrees to the coils that I've just created. So they're my cord ends. And they've got circles at the end, so I can link into them. One will be the eye of the clasp, and one will have my fishhook fastener connected to it. Whoops, they're alive. Just dropped it. So there we are. Cut off any excess wire and make sure it's sitting nice and neat within the cord, into the coils rather. And now we want to make your fish hook. So again, I'm using the same chunky wire to give it a chunky look. So I'm starting off with a little circle at the end, and then I'm going to make the hook, and then I'm going to leave a tail of 1 inch and a bit and come and finish that off in a minute. But first of all, we need to work harden. We need to work harden the very ends of the cord ends, the coils. So just hammer those ends only. And that really makes them firm and solid. So they'll go on the ends of my cord. And then my fish hook also needs to be work hardened. So I'm stress hammering the front especially, because it makes it look nice. Splays the wire out, sort of mushrooms it out. And now we're going to connect everything together. Now you can put glue at the ends, but you just basically need to feed them on to the end of the cord, and then very slowly and gently take your chain nose pliers and only squeeze and tighten the last link of the coil. Don't touch the rest of the coil at all, just little tiny movements, moving it round and round. And this particular macrame cord, or I got it on an Etsy site, it's lovely. It's so soft that you really don't need glue, because your wire will sort of really hold and sort of grip into the softness. So, and then you push that last tightened coil down into the rest of the coil, and it sort of disappears in there, so you don't see this little hidden sort of hooking, but it's nice and firm in there. Obviously do put a bit of glue if you're also worried, but these things aren't heavy, so it should hold. So on the other side, it's exactly the same thing. Tiny little squeezes. You just go around squeezing and squeezing the end, so it gets smaller and smaller and tighter and grips onto that cord, and then push it down, that last link down in, so it goes into the tube, or the, into the coil tunnel, and it sort of disappears. You don't see it there. I've pushed my cord a little bit out, so I'm going to see if I can twist it out, or I can use a scissors and just cut that little end off, because I don't particularly want the blue showing. And now, just so I can progress and show you, I'll do that later, I'm going to do a link. This is the fish hook, but I'm going to open that link up. I'm not going to complete it. It's going to be a wrapped link, but I'm going to leave it open so I can feed it onto the end, the cord end. So it goes into the end, and then I'm going to hold it closed with one of my pliers, my round nose pliers, and then I'm going to wire wrap the end around the stem just under the hook and cut off the excess. and that means it's wire wrapped in there and it can't come out, can't open up. And just for security's sake, I'm just going to give that little wrapped area a tiny bit of a hammer. Not much, it's just literally, it flattens it and compresses it. You don't have to do that at all. I'm just a hammer junkie or a whammer junkie. And that's it. So you can see how that would fasten together and hold very easily. So I hope you've enjoyed seeing this project and it gives you inspiration.